We are just a few days away from a national championship game that many of us anticipated. Georgia, Alabama, clearly the two best teams in college football, and squaring off for a second time in about 6 weeks. You got Gary Harris at the line from WVUA there in Tuscaloosa. Gary, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Mark. Good to be with you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And so what leads you to believe that this is either going to be a similar outcome and flow of a football game that we saw in Atlanta, and what leads you to believe that it may not?
Well, first of all, and I caught a lot of flack here in Tuscaloosa, you can imagine. I picked Georgia to win the SEC championship game over Alabama. I thought it was Georgia's time, and it still may very well be, because that turned out to be, a mulligan for them, which they earned, by the way. They deserve to be in the playoff. I think we knew they were one of the top 4 teams regardless of that. But I was caught off guard by the SEC championship game, although nothing should surprise me with Nick Saban and Alabama. But I did not expect that Alabama offense to riddle that Georgia defense the way that they did in that game. And it left us with a lot of questions about Georgia's defense, and offense too, for that matter, with Stetson Bennett. Again, when he gets behind, can he bring you back? I mean, Georgia, and I mean this complimentary, Mark, they've been a bully all year. They've been able to just bully teams and dictate and play from out front and run the football. And Stetson Bennett has been a very good quarterback for them, but they played ahead all year long until that game. Even though they jumped out 10-0, the first quarter was a good performance by Georgia. It did not look good for Alabama. That crossing route to Jamison Williams from Bryce Young changed everything. And then once Alabama got the lead and had Georgia on their heels, Bennett did make mistakes. We saw him throw the 2 interceptions. We saw him throw the pick 6, and Alabama went on to win 41-24. Now, as far as this matchup, do I expect it to be similar? I do expect that Alabama is going to have an opportunity to win the football game based on what I've seen now from these two teams and seen them play head-to-head. I was in the building. I don't think the game will play out like that one. I do expect Georgia's defense to adjust and do some things better, but I also expect Alabama to adjust. Brian Robinson, Mark, he wasn't anywhere close to 100% in that game. Even though Alabama ran it okay, he was not 100%. Now he is. We saw him go up against Cincinnati and get a Bama Bowl game record 204 yards rushing. So I think Alabama is not going to want to fall behind 10-0, even though the end result was well. I think Georgia is certainly not going to want to get behind. I think they're going to try to bring pressure in different ways. Bryce Young, everybody keeps saying Georgia didn't get any pressure in that game. That's not necessarily correct. They got pressure at times. They just didn't get him on the ground. When they did bring pressure, he was able to sidestep or get out of the pocket or throw it away or create with his legs and do some things like that. So I think Georgia can get to Bryce Young. The question is, can they get him on the ground? Can they affect him? Can they hit his arm? Can they cause a fumble or an interception or something like that? So I don't expect the game to go that way. I don't think Alabama's going to win by 17 points. I don't think this is going to be a 17-point margin of victory. I think this game is going to go down to the wire. These are the two best teams playing for all the marbles. Both are going to be extremely well prepared and focused in the game. And I think we're going to have a game that goes right down to the end, the way these two teams have played, in the SEC championship game a few years ago and in the national championship game when Tua hit the second 26. I'm expecting that kind of game, but I will change my prediction this time. I watched that game. I know how dominant Georgia's been. I know how dominant they were against Michigan, but I can't get that out of my head. I can't remove that. And I can't remove the history between these two teams. And I can't disregard the fact that Kirby Smart is 0-4 against Nick Saban. And I also can't disregard that Alabama's got the best coach in the country, maybe in the history of the game. They've got the best offensive player in the country, in my opinion, in Bryce Young. And they've got the best defensive player in the country in Will Anderson Jr. So I'm going with Bama 31-27.
Very nice. It's great to have Gary's prediction right here at the Voice of College Football. So college football, unlike any other sport, because of the lack of games played and because of the various factions throughout the country that play on the big stage near the end of the season, you try to go through this exercise of logistics and what transitive scores mean this and that and so forth and so on. And the conclusion I've come to is that the SEC is still the best conference. The other conclusion is I've come to, and it's been for a long time, is that the Big Ten is the second best conference. And then if you match up the bulk of those conferences, they're pretty comparable. But Georgia and Alabama have elevated beyond everybody else. That's number one. Now, to try to get a feel for this game, I'm kind of caught where you are in that I cannot remove what I saw the first weekend of December in Atlanta. But if you take all the other factors into it and all the other results that these teams laid out there, Georgia would seem to still be a better football team.
Yeah, you can certainly make that argument. Again, I thought they were a better team going into the SEC championship game. That's why I picked Georgia, knowing that I was going to get grief for it. And they still may very well be. But having said that, when Alabama plays at a high level, now we've seen the ceiling for Alabama. And the ceiling for Alabama is that they're good enough to beat Georgia. Okay. And they did not have a smoother ride during the regular season as Georgia did. Alabama lost a game. They came close to losing a couple of more. I would also argue, though, Mark, that when you play in the SEC West Division, it is an easier path to the SEC championship game than it is playing in the East. And even though Georgia was a dominant football team, I still think Alabama played more teams that were capable of challenging them than Georgia did. Can Georgia win the game on Monday night? Absolutely. And what happened December 4th? You know, they don't let you start out 41-24. Alabama doesn't have a 17-point advantage going into that game. And Alabama on the betting lines is an underdog. I've got no problem with that. And I would not be surprised at all if Georgia won that game. But there's this narrative, Mark, and you've heard it, that for some reason, Alabama's victory over Georgia in that SEC championship game has been discounted a little bit. You know, I've heard, well, Georgia, knew they had the mulligan. They weren't as focused. The SEC championship was never their end goal. Their end goal was a national championship. Alabama had its back against the wall. I've heard all these excuses as to why Georgia didn't play as well as it would have liked to have played, and Alabama played great. I'm not buying any of them. I think Georgia was zeroed in, dialed in, focused, ready to play that game. They didn't want to lose that game. They wanted to win the SEC championship. They wanted to beat Nick Saban in Alabama. They wanted to make sure they had no opportunity to run into Alabama again. So I'm not buying any of that. So my point with where I'm going with this is I see a lot of people saying, well, this time Georgia's going to be dialed in. This time Georgia's going to be focused. They were dialed in and focused the first time. I'm not saying they can't win the football game, because they can, but this baloney about they weren't ready to play the first time these two teams met, that's garbage. So I thought Alabama took Georgia's best shot in that game and were able to defeat them. So again, based on what I've seen, based on where they're at going into this game Monday night, I think Alabama will find a way to win it.
Folks, please like the video, share these videos out on social media, subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. We always appreciate hearing from Gary Harris, WVUA sports director there in Tuscaloosa. Did Alabama intentionally play the type of methodical game that it did in Cincinnati, not just to win that football game, but also to set itself up for the next game?
I think that is a great point. I have said that since the Cotton Bowl last week, which unfortunately I didn't get to attend because I had COVID last week of all things. But, watching the game on television, I thought it was, and I've heard some Alabama fans complaining a little bit about the offense because, you get spoiled. You see Bryce Young win the Heisman and light up Georgia. Well, why couldn't he light up Cincinnati? Alabama had a perfect game plan in that game. Cincinnati runs that unique 3-2-6 scheme, and they've got great corners, and they played soft in the secondary. They really did. And I don't blame them. I thought their game plan on defense was perfect. If Alabama's going to score, make them go 11, 12, or 13 plays. Don't let Bryce sling it one time and hit Jamison for 75 over the top. They weren't going to allow that to happen. Alabama showed patience, and Mark, Alabama showed why it is the premier college football program in the country, because nobody's ego got in the way of winning the game. Jamison Williams wasn't complaining because they were throwing it to him underneath and he was catching the ball for 7 or 8 yards. Bryce Young wasn't concerned that he didn't pass for, 300 or 400 yards. Heck, didn't even get to 200. They were concerned with winning the game. They took what Cincinnati gave them. They methodically put a beat down on that team. Defensively, Alabama knew they were better on the line of scrimmage. Offensively, they knew they were better on the line of scrimmage. And they just took their time and got out of there with a win. I don't think they were really concerned as much about the next game as far as changing things up for Georgia. I think they just wanted to do what they needed to do to win that game. Now, having said that, I think it certainly gives Georgia something to think about going into the championship game. You've seen up close what Bryce Young is capable of doing. Now you're seeing what this running game can do with a healthy Brian Robinson. So I thought it was brilliant by Bill O'Brien and Nick Saban and Pete Golding. Hey, Cincinnati is a worthy adversary, but we know we're better on the line of scrimmage. And they can't beat us. I think this was the message to the team. They can't beat us unless we help them out, unless we turn it over, unless we give them a short field, unless we make mistakes. Over 60 minutes, if we just play sound, fundamental football, we're going to win the game. And that's what they did, 27-6.
So you stated just a second ago with a healthy Brian Robinson, but what about with a healthy offensive line? So do some of the injuries up front that were suffered against Cincinnati concern you?
Yeah, I mean, all injuries concern me. Mechie still being out concerns me. I think that could be a factor in the Georgia game. Ekiyor is available to come back and play right guard, I think, in the game. The situation at center with McLaughlin is I think that they just may feel like he's playing better football right now than Dalcourt. So I wouldn't be surprised if McLaughlin starts at center, even if Dalcourt is 100% healthy. But I think Ekiyor will be back at right guard, although I thought J.C. Latham, the true freshman, did a good job in that game. But they should be okay on the offensive line. I think Chris Owens is back rotating at right tackle. I think he's going to be healthy enough to start in the game. So I think they'll be okay on the offensive line. I do think the Mechie absence is going to hurt because he was such, caught 96 balls, Mark, and he did a lot of the dirty work, went over the middle, caught the short balls, got yards after the catch, and really you couldn't just try to put all your attention on Jamison Williams, because if you did, Mechie would kill you too. And he really helped open things up over the top for Williams. So I think that's a huge loss. I do think that, Brooks has done a good job. He caught the ball against Auburn to, get the game into overtime, caught a nice touchdown against Cincinnati, and he'll do a good job. But they do miss Mechie. But I think offensive line-wise, they're going to be okay.
Gary, as many people that watched the college football playoff game between Alabama and Cincinnati watched the Rose Bowl. The viewership was almost identical, and almost as many people watched the Rose Bowl as watched the Georgia-Michigan game, which obviously involved what was supposed to be a closer game, and then also another brand name program. Is this situation not good for the entire nation in regards to college football popularity?
Oh boy, we've heard that a lot since the weekend. I don't know. I think one thing, let's just be honest, you've got the two college football playoff semifinals on New Year's Eve, and it's a Friday. New Year's Eve falls on a Friday. I just think that by the nature of the date, the viewership's going to be down a little bit. And, the Rose Bowl is iconic. As far as, regional bias against the SEC, I don't know. I will be interested in seeing what the numbers are on Monday night up in Indianapolis. I think if I'm a college football fan, and I'm not an SEC fan, if I'm a Big Ten fan or Pac-12 fan or Big 12 fan or ACC fan, am I tired of the SEC? Sure. Yeah, I probably am wishing it wasn't a SEC versus SEC national championship game. But as a fan too, I want to see the two best teams. And Mark, I think anybody that's objective, whether they live in the Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, the Northeast, Southwest, wherever they live in the country, if they're a college football fan and they follow the sport and they're being objective, I think most of them would admit we've got the two best teams in the national championship game. And ultimately, I think that's what we should all want and strive for as fans. So I don't know. I do think there's some fatigue in regards to the SEC. And I think last weekend, there were a lot of people that were pulling for Michigan and Cincinnati. I do believe that. But it was clear on New Year's Eve that Georgia and Alabama were better than both those teams by a substantial degree. So
Absolutely.
We've got the two best teams. And if I'm a college football fan and it's the national championship game on a Monday night, I'm going to be watching the thing. But we'll see. We'll see what the numbers are for the championship game. You're right. For the semifinals, they weren't good.
Gary, hope you're feeling fine and feeling better and everything's good. And we appreciate you making time for us. So enjoy the game, and we will see you soon.
All right, Mark. Thanks. You're the best.